Alright, so hey everybody. I'm just gonna give this to you while I can. It's Friday night, but I'm hoping you're at least watching this by Monday morning. It's a little help on explaining the Achaemenid Empire for all y'all having trouble with textbook, or even bother to opening up the textbook, which I highly recommend. So here's our lesson for the day. As we normally do, we start off with a do now question. What do all of these empires have in common? So if you want to pause me, take a moment, guess what you think is the correct answer, because I'm going to tell you what it is in 3, 2, 1. It's choice number 2. And you're probably struggling with, well, you know the Persians, the Greeks, and the Romans, but who are these Assyrians? And if you're reading the textbook, I believe they are mentioned. These are the guys who are, they're famous for helping to spread the Aramaic language. They were known for being one of the first empires, which means there's like this connotation where you have a directive to expanding your borders. So you can definitely consider them a warrior society, and they're going to expand their borders to encompass the bordering of the Mediterranean Sea, like the other 3 that you see here. But for the people of the day, the Achaemenid Empire, also known as in history as the Persian Empire, will be one of the largest empires to have ever existed, in part due to its size, but also its population. It's predicted that at some point over 50 million people were being ruled in the borders of this empire, and at the time the world's population, 50 million people, was probably 44% of the world's population. So kudos to the men of the empire who were able to regulate and govern efficiently. The Achaemenid Empire will end with the defeat by Alexander the Great. So one of the last emperors of the Achaemenid Empire, Darius III, is going to die, and Alexander the Great will come in and basically take all the land that the Achaemenid Empire had owned by the time they were at its decline. The Persians are mostly noted for being the antagonist foe of the Greeks. They are mostly painted in a negative light by Greek historians, obviously, because there's a bias there. But who doesn't like a David and Goliath story where the little guy wins, you know? So with the Greeks, the perspective they have towards the Achaemenid Empire is one where the Achaemenids are painted as evil. But one could argue that the Achaemenids were an exceptional historical entity in the fact that they had some of the first ideas as to how to institute infrastructures across such a large and expansive empire. And we'll get into a little bit more of that as we go through each of the emperors that are most famous for having to exist in the Achaemenid Empire. The rule over the conquered peoples was generally liberal. They would rule with tolerance, so different languages, different views were accepted. Reports and inscriptions were usually trilingual across the empire so that they could be translated or interpreted by many instead of a few. And the way that the empire was ruled was through a designation process. There was a centrally bureaucratic government, and there were provinces that were divvied up across the empire known as satraps, and you had almost like governors known as satrapies ruling each of these governments, or satraps. and this allows for a more organized and efficient ruling, because you can't have one person ruling over all of these millions of people without the help of others who are putting out secret spies, making sure that taxes are being taken efficiently and censuses are being done appropriately. So the first guy, Cyrus II, or Cyrus the Great, he would be most noted for adding a lot of the territory that was considered the Achaemenid Empire. He was a great strategist. Unfortunately, he does die in the battlefield, but before that day comes, he does a lot of cool things that show you of the tolerance of the Achaemenid, and whether or not it was for their own profits, they still are recorded, even in the Judeo-Christian texts, as being a savior. Some of the Jews would anoint him as some sort of like a lord or semi-messiah, because he was known for freeing the Jews who were enslaved during the Babylonian captivity. I think Nebuchadnezzar was responsible for it, but you could check that out yourselves. Anyway, he basically said, hey, all of you Jewish people, those of you who were forced to live in Babylon and move away from what you would consider your homeland of Palestine, you no longer have to live in Babylon. You can go back. You could return to Palestine, which, if you recall anything about the Jewish lesson we learned, the land of Canaan, which is also known as Palestine, which also is Israel, kind of, sort of, encompasses a very, very holy site, which is why many Jews, Christians, and Muslims fight over it, because a lot of holy events occurred there. Anyway, Cyrus the Great, everybody, Cyrus the Great. Another dude, Darius the First, he's actually pretty famous for his initiation of building, encouraging the road system, making a lot of public works occur. And it's funny because Xerxes, his son, who's famous for the Battle of Thermopylae, his son's going to carry out a lot of his public works, but Darius the First puts much of it into action. And public works are important because, A, they're necessary for the functionings of the population in a given area. So, like bridges and roads, those are things that have to be maintained. But, excuse me, my phone is ringing. Sorry about that. That was just a quick phone call from my husband. Anywho, Darius, we've heard of him before when we learned about the Greeks, and he sent his soldiers, or his force, over to Athens, and Athens was able to fight them off in the Battle of Marathon, which I think was like a half-an-hour battle where thousands of Persians were killed, and the Athenians, it was a Greek victory. And Darius would always remember that, to the point where he would have a slave whisper in his ear, "Remember the Athenians." So, this would be the event that would cause Xerxes also to want and seek revenge from the Greeks for his father. Anyway, going back to public works, Darius worked on also, or expanded on, the Qanat system. And if you look at a desert, right, there's obviously not a lot of water, but there's things called oases. And the idea behind that was that the desert is always shifting, and so eventually there's this place where there will be water, or a spring that will turn up. And this system of a Qanat is like, if water passes through like open ditches, it'll obviously evaporate quicker. To prevent that, though, the Qanat will lead the water from the hills through these series of tunnels. And to get the water out, holes are dug up to tap into this tunnel about every 20 yards or so, as you can see in this drawing or depiction. And I encourage you to go online and watch some videos of these Qanat systems. They are incredible. And the fact that they still do it today is pretty remarkable. Yeah, so that's the Qanat system, which is definitely needed in the desert area that they lived in. But he was a big-time administrator. He secured borders from external threats. He was super organized, and his power wasn't checked by others, but he had others helping keep his power secure, so that's important to know. Xerxes, on the other hand, was, self-centered, greedy, ignorant to the point as far as him believing like he was almost like a god. And so much so that he really never thought he could actually lose to the Greeks, but he does, and he basically watches it from afar, and he's looking at this, I think it was the Battle of Salamis, and they tell him, listen, guy, get back on your boat bridge that you made across the strait back there, we're gonna light it on fire. And so he eventually retreats, and he focuses on completing the public works buildings that his father had started. And he'll never start any of his own. It's mostly just him helping out what his dad had started. Okay, these two are a little messy. I believe Artaxerxes would grow up to the throne under his father's bodyguard. And his father, I believe, was Xerxes. And eventually, as he grew older, the bodyguard that raised him actually ends up killing Xerxes. And then Artaxerxes ends up killing the bodyguard, leaving him to rule the empire. Artaxerxes is more notable for his flourishing of the Aramaic language across the entire empire, much like how Latin spread across the entire Roman Empire and allowed ideas to thrive, spread quicker. One of which in the Persian Empire that thrived and spread quickly was the idea of Zoroastrianism, which is kind of funny because that's where a lot of the foundations of Judaism, Christianity come from. Supposedly Zoroastrianism was created like 3,500 years ago, whereas Judaism was 3,000 years ago. So again, this is a pre-Islamic faith. It was here in Iran prior to, way prior to Islam being created. There's still some areas, very, very small, in isolated areas, that practice Zoroastrianism. Some highlights of Zoroastrianism is that it's one of the first, if not the first, monotheistic faith. So you have this idea and concept where there's only one God rather than hundreds or millions, and this one God is idealized as like the supreme force and is the cause of why the world exists. Like he created it, or he had some sort of hand in painting this world that we live in, and that this God provides humans with free choice that is provided with a soul and a body, and they have choices that consequently lead to the idea of what they believe is heaven or hell. So it's not the point at which the God is leading our lives, it's our choices that lead us to the idea of heaven or hell. So I'm going to stop here because it's going to end, but I will start another video. if you'd like to watch it again for the next topic.